So I am liking the area that you set up in the club, Joe, for posting our action items. I feel like that's going to add a ton of accountability.
Yeah, I know it's been fun for me at least. You were super slow in getting yours out there. I felt like you just didn't want to talk about them right away.
I was. Well, we were talking a little bit before we hit record about my crazy day, but it's actually been a couple crazy weeks because I was working on this video project, which ended up being way bigger than I originally anticipated. And the deadline didn't move because it coincides with an app release. So I literally worked like 12-hour days, 13 days in a row, I think, to get that out the door. And didn't even think about bookworm or action items until after that happened. Sorry, everybody.
That would be a mic fail.
Yep, but they are up there now. And I think it's cool to see some of the conversation that's happening in some of those. Like, there's a lot of back and forth on your exercise habit, for example.
Yes.
So actually, do you want to talk about that one first? I know it's not in the exact order we've got in the outline, but since I brought it up.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Because I think it was like the day that the episode released, I went up and put my action items on the club, and I had the two, which was building an exercise habit and building a journaling habit. And I've been trying to, every 4 or 5 days or so, 3 days, sometimes every day, just kind of depends. It's just posting updates on what's going on with me and those. And it's been kind of fun to get some feedback. I can tell there's a couple of you that really want me to spend a lot of money on a cycling bike right now. That's
the Peloton.
It's just not gonna happen. So it's just not. It's the classic. Everybody, it's really easy to spend somebody else's money, but I'm not going to. Sorry.
It does look cool though.
I get it, but I'm just not going to put it in the middle of my living room and say amazing. No, just not going to do it.
Put it in the middle of your master suite / office.
Sure. That would go over real well, I'm sure.
In fact, you could ride it while you're podcasting next episode.
Do you think it would make noise?
Probably.
Okay. Kind of like my sump pump today. If you hear the big loud shh, doosh, it's a sump pump sitting not too far from me because, lots of snow when it warms up equals lots of water, which means trying to keep water out of the house. So
yeah,
it quit running a little bit earlier, so I think we're okay. Anyway, posted about the exercise thing. My wife and I have been doing yoga every other night, about 3 times a week. That has proven to be super helpful and is working really well as far as the exercise piece goes. I cannot tell you that I ever thought I would be somebody who does yoga. That I have no idea why. It just never crossed my mind. It's never been a thing that I've been interested in. And yet here I am.
Well, you and Brett Terpstra both. I remember talking
right.
to him at MacStock last year, and he was getting into it. And my wife saw some of the stuff that he was posting and like the poses he was doing and stuff. And she's into yoga. I'm really not. She tried to get me into it at one point. I understand the value of it. I probably will at some point. It's probably going to be an action item for one of these episodes. In fact, I did have one a long time ago to try it.
Yeah.
But anyway, she saw Brett and she's like, he's really good.
Yeah. Well,
so maybe you and Brett can do yoga together. I don't know how close you guys are in the frozen tundra over there.
I don't know. He's a couple hours away from me, so not likely to happen, but yeah, still interesting. I will say it's been fascinating to see how that particular practice has destroyed my meditation habit altogether. So
funny.
It rendered my meditation habit completely useless, it seems. So that one fell off. Whoops. I don't know. But that's been kind of a fun one to see building. So my wife and I do it together. So there's a little bit of the accountability there. The journaling habit, I have had a handful of nights when I have not done it, but for the bulk of the time I am every night. I probably need to post an update on that one on the club. But that one, not anything like groundbreaking out of it, other than the habit does exist and it seems to help me with reflecting on what happened that day. So that one's going.
Journaling, in my opinion, is kind of like a complementary bookend maybe to meditation, where that really makes a difference for me. I can see in the long run when I consistently do that. And it's been a battle for me back and forth over the years to maintain that habit. I do have an action item of using a habit tracker, which is going to help in all areas, that one included. But for me, that's the one where I notice it if I don't journal every night. Like after 3 or 4 days, I start to recognize that I'm way more stressed out and everything's a much bigger deal than it needs to be. And so I don't know why, like doing it at the end of the day for me really moves the needle, as opposed to a lot of people do the meditation at the beginning of the day. And that really makes a difference that they can see. I didn't really see that from the meditation piece, but I definitely see it from the journaling habit.
Yeah, I think most nights is whenever I've done yoga, I end up journaling afterwards. Oddly enough, I think I end up journaling longer during those times. Not sure if there's any correlation there, but it's what it is.
You have like a fancy pen and a paper notebook that you use for this, right?
Totally.
Okay, so how long do you typically journal? What's your process look like? Do you have prompts that you answer? Do you just like morning pages in the evening sort of a thing?
No, not exactly that, but I know that whenever I sit down, like I've got the fancy pen, I've got the journal, but I don't know. I guess I sit down after, like, I've got everything set out for the next day, all my coffee gear, breakfast, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm sitting down because I did the whole habit buckling thing where I've got one habit and I just buckled this onto the end of it. So it just becomes part of that flow. So thank you, James Clear, for that particular process. By making that shift to putting it at that time, I just grab my Lake Term notebook and then I've got the fountain pen that I just set down with it. But really all I'm trying to do is figure out how do I feel about how the day went. Seems like I've got enough moving and going on right now that there's usually one point that I'm either worried about, stressed about, or trying to make a decision about. That whatever that thing is from the day, or sometimes it's a couple things, I'll sit down and write those. I had a couple nights where it was one sentence. I had a couple nights where it was probably a couple paragraphs. It just kind of depends on what's on my mind because I'm just trying to get that out of my head. Otherwise, sleep eludes me, and it helps me to get some of that out of my brain so that I can settle down. So not rocket science, not anything specific, but pretty fluid.
Gotcha. Well, that's the thing with all of this personal growth, self-improvement stuff is I think people have a negative view towards it because they think that the people who are saying this stuff think that this is revolutionary stuff and they've discovered the secret of life, but none of it is complicated.
No.
It's actually pretty simple if you think about it, which is why I really appreciated Atomic Habits by James Clear, because literally it all comes down to your habits. You do the right things every day, you get the right results. You do the wrong things every day, you get the wrong results. So.
Right. Totally.
And then it's constantly adjust and repair. So you hear us talk about it. And I feel like on this podcast, we try to do anyways a decent job of not portraying ourselves as the experts and we've got this all figured out. But the truth is that if you do hear that in the productivity space, that those people mess up just like everybody else does. And they're constantly rebooting their habits and figuring things out and making adjustments. And nobody's mastered this stuff, even though it's not complicated.
Yeah, if you ever want proof that we don't know what we're doing, just look at how many times I've tried the meditation habit. Proof right there.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got?
All right. So my action items here. I had an action item to reevaluate my habits and also to use a habit tracker. I kind of combined these because I am using a habit tracker. I'm using Productive, which is the best one that I've found for a lot of people. I even wrote a review of it for the Sweet Setup not too long ago. Even though at the time I was experimenting with a different one, Habitica, which is kind of like a social thing, but it completely stopped working for me the other day. And that was kind of the thing that got me away from using something. And I kind of just let it sit for quite a while. And then when we did the James Clear book, I recognized that, oh yeah, I really do need that piece back. So I am proud to say that I'm using Productive and it is going well. It also, one of the unexpected benefits of doing this is like the journaling habit, for example, I do that fairly consistently. So in my mind, I'm a legend and I do it every single night, right? But Productive tells me, no, you missed it last night. So Yeah, that's helpful. So the stuff I put in here, the stuff in my morning routine, which I mentioned, I've kind of simplified. So it's reading my Bible, praying, and stretching. I've got a couple things that I do anytime during the day. A lot of them are fitness related. And one of the cool things about productive is you can say, I want to do this so many times in a week. So I've got hit the gym 3 times a week, go for a run 2 times a week, and then cycling is something that I need to do for my knee based on the physical therapy that I did. So I have that for once a week, adds up to 6 times a week.
Sure.
I've also got a habit which I have set to any time during the day, but only during work days. So Monday through Friday of writing. So this is going to inspire me to write every single day, which is tied to all of the goals that I want to achieve for my 12-week year. And then I've got 2 in the evening, which is read and journal. And like I said, for the most part, I do pretty good with these, although I was really mad at myself to recognize that I forgot to journal last night and I broke my streak. So I guess the app is doing what it's supposed to.
Nice. Yeah. No, as long as it works. Like, I've tried these trackers before, but it just doesn't seem to trip my trigger for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think if you have a lot of habits that are fairly firmly ingrained, and those are fine, Productive also has a cool feature which will help you stack one additional habit on top of it, which is called a boost mode. And it's kind of like a do-style nagging reminder for a specific habit. So if journaling is the thing that you really want to add to all the habits that you are that you hit all the time, you can say boost this one, and then when you set an alarm for 7 p.m., for example, to remind you to journal, it will keep reminding you over and over and over again until you do it. And you can customize how often the intervals are and how much it's gonna bother you, but really it's just gonna annoy the heck out of you until you finally do what you said you were gonna do. And I think that's a really cool mechanism for stacking these habits.
Sure. Cool.
So yeah, I'm happy with Productive at the moment. I'm sure something new and shiny will appear in the future and I'll take a look at it, but it's working for now.
Shift over and call it good.
Yep. Another one I had was to add questions to my personal retreat of what habits do I want to add and remove. And you commented in the club that this seems really easy and you should have done it by now. And I said, yes, I have done it for me, but I also have a course about this and I feel like a hypocrite if I add it and don't include it in the course. So I've got a list of things that I want to update in the personal retreat course. Chris Upchurch, who is somebody that I met actually at the Mac Power Users live event in Chicago, had asked me to update the workbook with all of the prompts from the videos. So that's on the list. And then adding this to the list, that's going to be there as well. And there's a couple other things that I've been kicking around, changes that I want to make.
Sure.
And that one, I don't know if that's worth tracking on Bookworm. That's not going to happen in the immediate future because I've got a bunch of stuff that I need to ship. But that's why I say that one is not finished yet.
Sure. Cool.
The other one I've got is to consider the question, how can I rewrite the rules in my favor? As I listened back to the episode that we did last time, I mentioned that I think I'm kind of doing this already. I realized after I've thought about this, I really am doing this. But one of the additional ways that I want to do this to a greater degree is with faith-based productivity. So I mentioned this is kind of like the center of all the things that I care about. But as I've been thinking about that course and the impact that I want to have, it occurred to me that there's another angle to this which I hadn't really considered. Like I kind of considered it, but I feel like I have more clarity because of this question, which is these in-person workshops. So I went to the Focus Course Live by Sean Blanc, and he basically taught the entire Focus Course in a single day. And I thought that was a really cool way to do it. And that kind of planted a seed. And then as I thought about this question, I was thinking to myself, my life theme, I want to help people connect to their calling, discover their destiny, live a life they were created for. How can I do that more effectively on a greater scale? And I kind of got this picture of like a church, for example, brings me in and I teach a 1-day workshop is a way to offset the cost of me coming in and teaching in person, which has a whole bunch of added benefits for me that go above and beyond listening to a podcast or even the video course. For me, that's one of the things I love about public speaking is I can make eye contact with somebody and I feel like I can make a bigger impact. But also the course is a cool way to support that. So I'm not just an inspirational speaker who comes and jacks everybody up and then leaves and nothing actually changes. So to offset the cost of bringing me in, everybody gets access to the course. Now you've got a system that you can use to support it after I leave. And I kind of got, as I was thinking about this picture of like pastors of small churches specifically, they have a tough job because they have to coordinate a volunteer army. You're not paying any of those people to do things, but you've got this vision for your church, and you've got to get everybody on board with that vision and then plugged into the right places so that the church can accomplish its mission, right? That can be tough. And wouldn't it be great if everybody in your church really connected with the gifts and the anointings that they have, like the way that they're wired, and they can flow in those things, and they're excited about being plugged in the spot that they are? Like, how much more of an impact could your local church have in that scenario? So that's kind of the outcome from this particular action item. And I'm sure there's going to be more from this, but I like this one. I think this is maybe something that I need to add to my personal retreat as well, but I don't want to make that formal.
Sure. No, it sounds like an interesting, like that question, how can I rewrite the rules in my favor? I could see that being a very good one to come back to regularly. Like I was trying to think through, would this make sense to put into like one of my normal reviews? Maybe. I don't know. I may not personally. I feel like I come at that very differently, but I could see how if you hadn't considered this before, it could be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that is one of those clarifying questions maybe where it constantly refines your vision. And I don't think you can do that enough. Obviously, you have limited time. So at some point, you got to quit asking the question and start doing the work. But I think there's value from it as long as you keep considering it.
Cool.
The other thing that we've got here under follow-up, which is something new, and this kind of just happened because I tweeted or sent you a screenshot of the Overcast terms, I guess. I was digging around in the settings the other day, and I found this section for podcasters on how you can implement the little button to support your shows. Like Relay's got those where you can go to the Overcast screen and you can tap on the little money icon in the bottom, and that takes you to the membership page. And if you want to pay a couple bucks a month, you can support your favorite shows. So I sent that to you, and then what was it? A couple hours later, you're like, I've got this set up.
I was like, okay, here you go. Like, all done. Got it. I got that covered. Because this is, this whole topic, and I suppose for the listeners, you should probably know, Mike and I talk a lot about ways that we can continue to, I hate the term, but monetize Bookworm in a way that would allow us to continue doing it, because it does take a significant amount of time.
Let me put it a different way. Keep Bookworm alive, because with your corporate job, like we've had to really juggle some things in order to make this work.
Yeah.
We've recorded on Saturdays and Sundays, which is a thing at one point I was like, I'm never going to do that.
Yep.
And it's also why this episode is going out late, because we had a weekend scheduling recorded and then some health stuff came up. Totally understand. Right. Like you gotta do what you gotta do. But that's the problem with the quote unquote passion projects. Like you gotta pay the bills. And so at some point we gotta consider like what do we get from the effort that we put into Bookworm, and is it a project we want to keep doing? And both you and I are totally committed to keeping this thing going as long as we possibly can. But also, I know you've mentioned before too, like the financial consideration, the return on the investment is something that weighs into the equation. So we've been thinking about that for a long time, not just how do we profit off of Bookworm, but how do we make this something that is sustainable without doing it in a sleazy, scummy way? Because we don't like some of the traditional options that are out there. You specifically, I know you mentioned you're not a fan of ads.
Yeah, no, this is because how many podcasts do we listen to that everybody has ads on them? It's it's the economy of podcasts. Like that's how podcasters make their money off of the show. I personally just don't like ads, period. Like I even run on my own VPN that blocks ads. Like that's, it's just the way that I do things. I don't like the process at all. And we've talked about it. I don't know how many times we've had conversations with people about bringing ads onto the show, but it's never worked out. I'm kind of glad it's never worked out. So when Mike texted me and was like, is there a way for us to set up kind of a membership of sorts for Bookworms? Like, yes, absolutely. Let's try that path. So, dear listener, what we're trying to do, and what we're doing an experiment here, is looking for ways to bring support to the show that allows us to keep ads off of it. Like that's the process that we're working our way through. So the mechanism by which we're doing this is through the Bookworm Club. You can get to the membership page via bookworm.fm/membership, and that'll take you to the sign-up page for it. You have to have an account on the club before you can go through that process. But once you do, and once you sign up to become a member of the membership side of this, we're granting you access to a members-only area of the club. But you also get the really cool little badge. If you've been to the club, you see how Mike and I have the little Bookworm logo next to our avatars. You'll get that as well. So those are the two things as kind of perks, if you will, for those as a part of the membership who will become a member of Bookworm in that way. So that's what we're starting with. We have lots of ideas on what we're hoping to bring to members-only area. We've talked about a bunch of different things. I would be very interested in, if you have thoughts on what should be a part of that and you do sign up, let us know in that members only area. That's an area that we're wanting to start with to try to help us keep ads off the show. Like that's our current experiment with it. So if that sounds appealing to you, bookworm.fm/membership, that'll get you started in that process.
Yeah, and I don't want to make any specific promises, but some of the stuff that we've kicked around just to give people some ideas are like a private feed for the Gap books that we do, which would probably not be a full-on Bookworm episode, but we would talk about some of the other stuff that we read that isn't officially part of Bookworm. I've got lots of stickers, lots of bookmarks that I could send people.
I'll say.
So we do want to hear like what would make membership more worth it for you. But for anybody who does want a way to support the show for $5 a month, we welcome any support that you would want to give us, and we really appreciate everybody who listens to the show, not just the people who leave the reviews and who post on the club. The Libsyn stats show that the show is growing, and we're thankful for everybody who listens, whether you decide to support us financially or not.
There you go. Support the show. Bookworm.fm/membership. Ready, set, go. All
right. So that always feels weird asking for money. Let's move on to the book.
Okay, sure. And it's kind of fun to bring that up because we're talking about trying not to have ads on the show, which brings us to today's book, which is perfectly suited for that.
Yes, the time has come to talk about Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. And it is no secret that I love Cal Newport's writing. So Good They Can't Ignore You was maybe one of the more impactful books that I've read as I think back over all the books that I've read over the last several years and like what I've applied from them. I realized that I got a lot from that one. I absolutely loved Deep Work, and Digital Minimalism is the newest book by Cal, and it's a little bit different than some of the other ones. In some ways, it's a natural extension of the Deep Work concept, but in a lot of ways, it feels like a very different type of book. He's kind of getting into territory where he knows he's going to tick some people off, and I feel like it affects his writing style a little bit.
I explained this book to a few different people, and the way that I came at this, Mike, was that I originally, when I picked this up, was very skeptical because I knew exactly what was going to be in this book. Like, get off social media, drop your email. Like, you just expect that. Like, that is exactly what he was setting out to do, kind of.
Yeah, he does it in a different way than I expected, though.
Yeah, but the flip side of this is that that's what I expected, and I expected the entire book to be about the things that we do every day on our devices that we shouldn't be doing and how we should be cutting back on those. But that was really only a piece of the puzzle. Like, that was only maybe half the book, maybe a little less than half the book.
Yeah.
It's definitely a theme that comes through the whole thing. But the part that I did not expect was his whole philosophy on what should you be doing instead.
Yeah.
Like that side of it, I was just completely caught off guard by. Like that was not a piece of this I was expecting at all. So he has this laid out in two different sections, one foundations, two practices. I thought it was kind of, we rail on books because they always have three parts, and he gives us one with two, and then it felt weird.
Okay. Yeah, the MindNote file for this looks really weird because it's just two colors.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was kind of odd that this is a thing I bring up all the time. So why are they always in three parts? Yeah. And then we get one that's not in three parts, and So, that one I felt weird about. But I did like that he had this whole second half of the book that wasn't based on drop things. It was very fascinating to me. So it was more about how do you build a lifestyle as opposed to get off your phone.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want to call out here at the beginning, because people probably look at the title and maybe they heard the introduction to the book and they're like, oh, I already know what this is about. I don't need to hear some researcher telling me how bad it is that I'm on my phone all the time. Yada, yada, yada. I've heard this all before. You really haven't. It's done in a way. The beginning of the book, by the way, there is a lot of that, because the foundations part, the first chapter is called A Lopsided Arms Race, and it's really all about the problem. But after that, he basically moves on to state his position and what he thinks you should do. And then the whole second part of the book kind of gets into the nitty-gritty details. And I would argue that you don't have to go all out and do the digital declutter that he talks about. We'll get to that. That's chapter 3. But there are pieces of this that anybody can apply. And I feel like after you read this, even somebody who hears this stuff and has studied this stuff, even researched this stuff, not to the degree that Cal has, but I've read a lot of the articles and was familiar with a lot of the studies that he mentioned and stuff like that. Even someone who has heard this stuff before, he leaves you with a lot of actionable stuff like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to apply that. I'm not going to go all in with everything that he says, but although I do think there would be some benefit if you decided to do that too. But anyways, we'll get to that. That's chapter 3. Let's start with chapter 1, the lopsided arms race. This is kind of where he talks about the problem that we're facing. And there's a couple things here that I wanted to call out. Number one, he makes an argument about the launch of the iPhone being the tipping point for this stuff, which I have totally thought this, but he articulated it way better than I did. So do you remember the speech or the keynote that Steve Jobs gave when he introduced the iPhone?
He introduced 3 new devices.
Yes, the iPod, the phone, and the internet communicator. And there was it like the 10th anniversary of the launch of the iPhone not too long ago, or the 10th anniversary of his death, or something like that. But people were replaying that keynote because it's kind of widely considered in the Apple community his best keynote ever. And
Right.
if you think about it, it was really impactful and it was really well done. But what struck me as I was listening to that stuff, even before I read Digital Minimalism, is like, wow, they really underestimated the internet communicator part of that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a little add-on thing. They listed it third, and no one knew what this was going to be. There was no app store at launch, and wow, have things really grown since that point.
Yeah, no kidding. Because they originally released that with the intent to control what you could do with it.
Yep.
And because that's how phones worked at the time, is you had certain apps that were only built by the creators of that device. And Apple followed suit on that. They had the apps that were on the phone that they built, but you couldn't put anything else on it originally. And if it had stayed that way, I don't know that we would have quite the problem that he refers to in the book. But
if we stayed that way, we'd have the minimal phone, which is still on Kickstarter.
Yeah, the light phone.
Yeah.
But I think that once they open it up to other developers, which at this point there would have been so much pressure for that they would eventually cave to it. And now it's become a major revenue source for them.
Yeah.
But like from a business stance, that makes perfect sense. Like I could easily see making that decision, but it has led to quite the process that we have today.
And that's actually a conversation that I had recently with somebody, where is the line between what is bad for somebody and they should know this and they should have some self-control versus what is the company's responsibility if they're preying on this stuff. One of the quotes in this book is by Bill Maher. He says, "Philip Morris just wanted your lungs. The App Store wants your soul." Which is maybe a little bit sensationalized, but as you read this, you start to think like, well, maybe not so much. He mentions an interview that Anderson Cooper did with Tristan Harris, who is a former Google engineer, who presented a talk at Google titled "A Call to Minimize Distraction and Respect Users' Attention." This talk is still on the internet. I went and looked through the whole thing. Did you look at this at all, or were you familiar with this?
I did not go through it after seeing. I had watched that a while back, so here's the thing: like with all of this, all the stuff we're getting ready to talk about when it involves the tech industry and attention, I work in that industry, so I'm very aware of, and have been for a number of years now, of the things that are being done on these devices. So a lot of that was not new to me. It was very interesting to see how Cal Newport pulled it together. But in this particular case, I think it's probably a couple of years ago maybe that I watched this, Mike. So it's been a while.
I had never heard of it, and I went through the slide. I didn't see the presentation he did, but I did find the original slides on the internet. And so I flipped through them and I was like, wow, this holds up really well.
Yeah.
He really nailed it. Basically, what he was saying is that as Google, they were uniquely positioned as one of the top tech companies to put a stake in the ground and say, we are going to be the company that cares for our consumer. And the way we're going to do that is we're not going to prey on their attention, which it's kind of funny. Google, it's like they make their money. They're in business now because of your personal data.
Yes.
But it didn't start out that way. He made this presentation, and at the time, he was actually given a new title at Google by the then CEO, Larry Page, as product philosopher. But he left after a while because it ended up being not anything real. It was just a title, and he wasn't able to make any positive change, which again, I get. Google's got investors who are concerned about how much money can you make, and this stuff is really, really valuable. So on one level or one angle, you can't really blame them for doing that. On the other side, when you recognize how much they're profiting off of your personal data, it feels really sleazy and scummy, and you feel taken advantage of.
Right.
And that's the thing with this whole concept of digital minimalism is I don't think people realize how valuable what they're giving to these companies is. And it's not a fair exchange. Gmail is, if you were to pay for it, $5 a month, and people just assume, well, I'm going to use the personal one for free, and I know they're going to use my data, but that's okay because the service that I get back is worth it to me. The amount of data that they're collecting from you and the amount of money that they're profiting off of it is worth way more than what you are getting.
Right.
And I think if there was one mindset shift that people should understand from reading this book, it would be just that. So you can decide for yourself what habits you want to change, eliminate, whatever, but just recognize how valuable your attention and your information is. And don't just give it blindly away, because it really is a valuable asset that you should be protecting.
Yep. There's a reason I run a VPN.
Yep.
Yeah, I try to limit as much as I can from companies like Google. Even so much, like I'm a big DuckDuckGo user, so
me too.
I've used DuckDuckGo for last probably year and a half, 2 years, almost entirely.
On that topic, real quick, I got to shout out Brett Terpstra just published as we record this, The Ultimate Guide to DuckDuckGo. So we'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. So anyway, like that sort of thing, it's crazy if you dig into, and he goes into Facebook left and right in this book, but
yep.
Between Facebook and Google and Twitter and all these social media and attention companies, like how many websites do you go to today and you almost can't read them because of the ads and such on them? Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yes.
Just as an example, I pulled up, I'm not going to tell you what the website is. I pulled up a specific website that I know is cluttered with tons and tons of ads and timed it. I had a thing on my computer that would time how long it took to load the web page, ran it, and it took somewhere around 22 seconds to load the whole thing. It got a lot of it up pretty quick, but then it continued to download more and more ads as you sat there. I turned on my VPN for it, which blocks a lot of that sort of thing, and it loaded the entire site in 3 seconds. So, like, okay, what? And then you start scrolling through it, and it's like 3/4 the page is just blank because those are where all the ads are. Like, it's just all gone. Okay, well, this is the economy of the internet, is selling people's attention. Like, that is the way that it operates. And I think this is the bulk of what Cal Newport is getting at. Is this is the problem with the way that things operate on the interwebs. Like, it's just the way that things work.
Yeah, and the addiction that stems from it is really the thing that people should be aware of. So we don't need to go too deep into this, but I did find it interesting that he defines what an addiction is as a condition in which a person engages in use of a substance or in a behavior for which the rewarding effects provide a compelling incentive to repeatedly pursue the behavior despite detrimental consequences. And he also shared that the American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse said that growing evidence suggests that behavioral addictions resemble substance addictions in many domains. So behavioral addictions is totally where the social media stuff fits in. And there's a couple of forces that are really driving this. One is the intermittent positive reinforcement, where you're not sure if you're going to get a whole bunch of likes or a whole bunch of, I don't know, what else is out there? I guess, Twitter switched to likes too now, so it's not favorites, but
likes are everywhere.
Likes are everywhere, which is one of my action items, is to never like again. But we'll get into that in a little bit. And then the other thing is the drive for social approval. So the thing here is, like, when someone tags you, the thought process is, oh, they were thinking of me. But these two things combined cause you or compel you to keep going back there. But also, they never live up to the expectations that you have when you're craving this stuff. So it's kind of a recipe for disaster. The solution he proposes is digital minimalism, which is the second chapter here. And he defines this as a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value, and then you happily miss out on everything else. And I think this is a really cool idea, regardless of the degree to which you implement this.
Which, this whole concept of digital minimalism, if you play off of, and he has all kinds of these deals in the problem area of the book, of where they bring in psychologists and a bunch of people to help build apps and tools to be addictive. They don't intend it to be an addiction, but they will refer to, like, they try to build in mechanisms to where you don't know when the benefit is going to come. You don't know when you're going to get the new notification. So you got to check it all the time, because then you get that little hit when you get it. Like, those are specifically engineered and designed to help bring you back more and more and more, because every time you open up Facebook, they make money. And in order to help combat that, the concept of digital minimalism is exactly what you would think. It is similar to the more broader term, minimalism, where you only have tools and things that provide value, and they are usable in many different ways. So you don't have excess. Like, that being applied to your digital life can have some pretty broad ramifications. And I think probably the one piece of this, Mike, that I thought was super helpful, because I'm very guilty of this. I don't have an action item technically on this, but we have a tendency with digital tools or apps, services, whatever you want to call them, that if there's any benefit whatsoever that I could get from something, we adopt it.
Right.
As opposed to saying, is that a benefit I should have or can't get elsewhere?
The any benefit approach.
Yep, the any benefit approach. So if it's possible that I could have anything good out of Twitter, I should have it, period. Not considering all of the negativity that comes with Twitter and the potential for worry and the potential for bullying and all of that can come with Twitter. Facebook the same. Like, we don't consider that side of it and just say, okay, if there's a single good point I can get from it, we adopt it, which is the absolute wrong mentality to have with that, because you don't necessarily need all of those things, because it is possible that having the thing, the social media or whatever it is, iPad, having that thing could bring you potentially more harmful things and spend more time on things you shouldn't be doing to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yes. Okay, I'll quit ranting now.
And that's the thing from this section, is to identify what costs and benefits are associated with the different platforms that you're using, because you don't just sign up for something because it provides you a benefit. You need to kind of do like a net cost analysis with all these things, which is one of the action items that I have, is to list the benefits that I get from the platforms that I use. And I already know, I haven't gone through this completely, but I already know that there's a couple things that are not going to be there anymore because if I'm honest with myself, I hang around there because I do get an occasional benefit from them, but they're not providing a level of benefit enough for me to consistently go back to that well. And one of the things, this isn't actually an action item for me, but I did write it down in my outline, is as I curb the social media use, how do I replace that with something better? And one of the things that I think provides better, deeper interactions than a lot of social media stuff is the discourse forums. So the club for Bookworm, for example, I have that in the discourse app, and along with a couple other forums, like the Mac Power Users one that you set up. So there's the focused forum on there, but I've also got the club. It's in the same app, so it's easy to go there and chime in and have conversations with people who are way nicer than the general social media public. And so like that's the place that I should be looking to have those meaningful interactions, not Twitter necessarily. And by the way, I'm not Twitter is not the thing that I am going to be giving up. It is going to come off of my phone, by the way. But all social media is going to come off of my phone as one of the action items from here. But I'm not ready to go all in with the digital declutter that he talks about in the next chapter.
Something I thought was fascinating about the whole digital minimalism concept, because essentially what he's talking about with this section is only using tools that are necessary for you to do what you find meaningful or that provide value to you or your community. And I was fascinated to see how he started to talk about the Amish and the Mennonite communities.
Yeah.
That dumbfounded me, because I grew up in an area where there was a fairly large like 2 or 3 Amish communities, and then a little bit further away from us there was 3 or 4 Mennonite communities. So I had a lot of interactions with these communities and know quite a bit about how they do things. So going through this and having him expound on how those communities make decisions on what technology they will and won't use was, one, really interesting to learn about, but 2, kind of dumbstruck me that it was in this book. So
yeah,
like, you're actually making that correlation. Like that is actually what you're saying. Now, he's not telling you go become Amish. Like he's not making that call, but he's at least making a plea that you should have the mentality of adopting technology that they go through. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I think this totally fits. I had no idea what this process looked like. So I found this section really interesting and enlightening. So he mentions that generally when new technology comes out, usually there is somebody in the Amish community specifically. I think he mentioned that there's a bishop. And so they go to the bishop and they ask if they can go look at this thing. And usually they say yes. And then the whole community is going to watch this one early adopter intently to see what impact the technology is going to have. So they're not just subscribing to the any benefit approach. They're weighing, is the net here positive or is it negative? And if it's negative, then it's prohibited. But if it's positive, usually it's adopted. And then there's another piece here with, I don't know how to pronounce this, the Amish Rumspringa. Is that how you say this?
Yes.
Maybe? Which happens when an Amish youth turns 16. I had no idea this was a thing. So they actually, when they turn 16, they're allowed to leave and see what the outside world is like before they decide to accept baptism into the Amish church. So go explore, go see everything that the world has to offer. And then if you want, you can come back. What was astounding to me is that 80 to 90% decide to come back. So it's not something where it's like, this is what we've always done. This is the way my parents brought me up. And so I'm stuck here because I've never experienced anything else. Like they are told as a rite of passage, go experience something else. Go experience the world. And then if you decide to come back, that great. But if you decide it's not for you, then fine. But I had no idea that it was going to be up to 90%, would decide to come back. That number seemed really high to me. Yeah. But I get it when you couple that with the process that they use for adopting the technologies and weighing the overall positive versus negative. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to become Amish. That's not going to be an action item. But
well, I can say, like, growing up in these areas, and when I was in high school, there were quite a few of the Amish kids that would come. They got to drive. They got to do a lot of these things that they didn't normally get to do. So I hung out with a number of them that were on their Rumspringa. So it was kind of cool to meet and get to know some of them. But I can't think of one that didn't go back. That I think all of them that I knew went back and were still to this day are part of that Amish community. So yeah, I don't know. I get it. I think I get it anyway. So, but it's a fascinating process for sure. And
yep,
he, as he expands on the digital minimalism concept of only adopting technology that would be helpful to you and not adopting something just because it might be good for you, he does step you through this digital declutter process of helping you see which ones you should or shouldn't have in your life. And it's a pretty severe process. So just to try to explain what the digital declutter is, it's a 30-day process, 1 month. Pick February if you can. In that month...
I think that's what Sean Blanc did, by the way.
Yes, he cheated. Totally cheated. In that 1 month period, your goal is to cut out absolutely everything that's unnecessary from a technology stance. If it's not vital to you doing your job, or it eliminates a connection point to somebody you have to stay connected to, get rid of it for 30 days. 1 month.
He defines optional as wouldn't harm or significantly disrupt the daily operation of your personal or professional life.
There you go. So using that definition, you eliminate everything out for 1 month. When you're done, here's the theory. After having done that 1 month period, you'll have the clarity to make clean decisions about which technologies you should or shouldn't have in your life. But you can't make those decisions until after you've had time without them, because at this point, we've spent so much time with them that we don't know what it's like to be without it.
Yep.
So you can't make clean decisions on what you should or shouldn't have because you don't know the alternative to what you currently have.
Yep. And then an important piece in step number 2, actually, is he says, during this 30-day break, explore and rediscover activities and behaviors that you find satisfying and meaningful. So he mentions like lots of people finished books during their digital declutter. And I think this is an important piece because if you don't fill that void with something else, you will instantly go back to that stuff at the end of the 30 days. And his whole point is after the 30 days, you need to reintroduce the optional technologies into your life starting from a blank slate.
Which is something I'm kind of nervous about because I have started a digital declutter, Mike. Like I about 10 days ago, I started it because that's when I got to that point in the book. And so I'm a third of the way through it at the moment. March is my month. I think somewhere in there. I think maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I think it was
Nice.
March 1st. I don't know. Somewhere in there. So I am doing this, and I can tell you that my view of things is already changing, and in a way that I was not expecting. Because one of the things that he mentions in here is like you have to go back and figure out what it is you like to do in the blank space. How long have I been talking about how like trying to minimize how much time I spend on the screen because I work on them all the time? Like this is something I've talked about for a long time.
Yeah.
And yet when I started doing this, I figured out that I spend a lot of my gaps on my phone without knowing it, which I'm not happy to say, but here we are. And through the process of like, at this particular moment, I don't even know where my phone is. It's somewhere. No, I think it's up on my nightstand upstairs. So because I'm separating from that, like I'm trying to make sure like I have set times in the day where I'll go catch up on text messages because there are a number of people that's my only way to talk to them. And one of those being my mother. And there's some health issues with my grandparents right now. So there's that. So that particular piece I'm trying to stay at least somewhat informed on. But for the most part, I've cut a lot of things out. So you were talking about like the Discourse app on your phone. Like I build those sites. So guess how many I had in there? I don't know. It was like 24 or so Discourse instances that were inside that app, but I deleted it. I had Slack on my phone. I got rid of that, pulled email off of it, all the social media stuff. There's a handful of things that I normally would just check once in a while, but probably the one that I pulled off my phone that caught a few people off guard when I explained this to them was I pulled drafts off my phone.
What?
I know, right? And that, it hurt when I did it. Like, okay, hit the little X button, hit delete, cry for a few minutes, and then set your phone down. Like that's that was what I saved the crying. Didn't actually cry over that. So I love you, Greg, but I had to do it because what I found was, and it's kind of funny too, because I've talked about this in the past where I've had this habit of before I would sleep my phone, I would tap the drafts icon in the dock so that drafts was open the moment I unlocked my phone so that I could type notes into it really quick. But I deleted drafts off, but I still have that muscle memory. So I had to make sure there was nothing in that spot in the dock. Otherwise, I would keep launching whatever it was there. But here's why I did that. Because at this point, like, what is wrong with you, Joe? Having my phone be my note-taking mechanism meant that I was required to keep my phone with me all the time.
Sure.
And it required me to always get onto my phone to make those notes. And it's too easy to just swipe up and tap something else really quick and check it while I'm there. So I had to get rid of that process. So now I'm like focused on my note cards that I keep in my pocket. I've gone through more note cards the last week and a half, 2 weeks than I ever thought I would.
Your hipster PDA.
And I think that's for the better. At the moment, I'm saying it's definitely for the better, but that was a tough one.
Wow. Kudos to you.
Scary.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being a wimp, but I am not ready to go all in with the digital declutter yet. I get the idea, and this is probably some level of justification. But as he's going through like all the things that people did during their digital declutter, whenever they felt the compulsion to go check their phones, a lot of that stuff I'm already doing and prioritizing. And could I do it a little bit better? Yes, absolutely. Which is why I'm definitely going to take some things off of my phone. But I want to view, not like hit the reset button and don't touch your optional technology for 30 days, but just reconsider everything and put the stuff that has a net positive value on there and eliminate basically everything that causes me to just consume. And if I'm going to create something, that's fine, but the endless feeds have got to go, and the notifications and all that stuff. So there's still some stuff that's gonna be there, but a lot of it is going to be eliminated as I transform what that device is used for. And that was another thing that I was thinking about. Like, if you wanted to take notes and drafts still, there is a Mac app. There, you can use other things for that role. You don't have to default to the phone. And that may be another approach for someone who is like me, not ready to go all in with this yet, is like, well, I want to eliminate this behavior. I recognize this is a bad thing. So what are the obstacles that I can put in my way to force me to do it some other way or some other place? I think that's definitely worth considering, but yeah, I'm not ready to just delete all the things. And yeah, I don't even, as I was thinking about this, I don't even know what I consider an optional technology. I think that how you use it determines whether it's optional or not. So Twitter, to check it on my phone, is optional, but being able to post to Twitter as I launch faith-based productivity, I would say is not optional. So as I was thinking about that with the different services and things, it just made it more complicated for me. We're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to reevaluate all the things and how I use them as opposed to going all in with the digital declutter. When he talks about the digital declutter, the way that I am wired, I read this and I feel like if I'm going to do this at all, I've got to do it to the T. And if I don't follow the exact letter of the process that he outlines, then I'm doing it wrong, and there's no point in doing it.
Well, I will say, like, to that point, like okay, so in the book, he recommends writing out your rules that you're going to follow during this declutter. But what I found, Mike, was that whenever I started this, like what I'm doing right now is very different than what I did when I started.
Okay.
And that was because I cut what I thought was all the optional stuff out. And then after about 2 days, I realized, oh, wait, there's still more that I need to cut out of this because this is optional too. And
Sure.
oh, no, that's optional too, that I thought were necessary whenever I first set it up. So it had to change because there was no way for me to really know all of those details. And it's messy for me because I work on the computer. Like, that's my job.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the difficult side of that. But I don't know that I would say you have to follow his rules to the letter to get the value out of it, because I'm not sure I'm following it to the letter, but I can already tell you it's been a huge benefit so far.
Yeah, I'm sure I will definitely do some 30-day something or other down the road, but
wait till February.
Yeah, I can save 2 days.
Wait a year to save 2 days.
Yeah, I'm not going to wait a year to start applying the stuff that he talks about, though, which is really kind of the next section. He has 4 different chapters which talk about kind of different individual things that you can do. And this is where I really got a lot of value out of the book, is talking about these different concepts and figuring out how I can apply these. That's kind of the approach that I take with every book that we read, honestly, is I'm going to grab something out of here, but I'm not going to necessarily believe everything that this guy or this lady is telling me to do. I'm not going to go follow all of their simple 5-step systems to success, but I am going to steal something and make a positive change and make a new habit, new neural net, but
yeah. And this section, I'll put it this way. If you go down the digital declutter path, you're going to realize you have a lot of extra time that you didn't realize you had.
Sure.
That's been my experience, and I'm picky about how much I use screens. And before this, and I've realized there's a lot more time that I didn't realize I was losing. And the trick here is that he knows that, so he helps you figure out what to do with that space. And this is where I say, like, he helps you build the lifestyle side of it.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. This first chapter in the new section, by the way, is titled Spend Time Alone. And one of the notes that I put under here is hooray for personal retreats.
Woohoo!
I don't know if that's just confirmation bias because I wrote the course on it, but did your mind go there as he's talking about Lincoln and the soldier's home and stuff like that?
Not for a personal retreat. I was more trying to figure out how can I do this every day? Like,
yeah. So just a couple of excerpts here. He mentions on page 91, there's a quote, but just to frame that a little bit, Abraham Lincoln basically would retreat from the White House where he was constantly under pressure to make those decisions. And he would record his ideas when he got to this place, which is now called the soldier's home. He would record his ideas on scraps of paper. He would sometimes store those in the lining of his hat as he would walk around the grounds of this, I guess it was like a farm back in the day. Now I think it's like in Washington, D.C. And it was here that he wrote the initial draft of the Emancipation Proclamation. So on page 91, he says, Lincoln's time alone with his thoughts played a crucial role in his ability to navigate a demanding wartime presidency. We can therefore say with only a mild hyperbole that, on a certain sense, solitude helped save the nation. And I really like this. I think that this is a great idea. He talks about solitude deprivation. On page 92, he says everyone benefits from regular doses of solitude, and equally important, anyone who avoids this state for an extended period of time will suffer. He talks about the different benefits of solitude, how Martin Luther King Jr.'s defining moment came from a moment of solitude. And I think that this is just a bunch of evidence for why a personal retreat is so important. Whether or not you follow the framework that I put together, it doesn't even matter.
Right.
Just the fact that you get alone with your thoughts and you let your brain unravel these things and you see things the way they really are. Because in the busyness of the day-to-day, there's no way you're seeing your situation clearly.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before. I work corporate, so I've got to commute every morning and evening right now. I still work from home once in a while, which is how we're recording this one today. But with that, I have that time, and it's a pretty decent commute. It's 35, 40 minutes one way. I don't turn anything on. Like everybody talks about, like, that's what I get my podcast listened to. It's like, I'm not going to lie. I have not caught up on podcasts in a while. Is that weird?
Maybe.
I make them, maybe.
I listen to enough for both of us. So
okay, there you go. So you can make up for me that way. I don't feel like a hypocrite.
Yep.
But I try to leave that space empty just because it's the only time I have to truly just think through things. I've done that for a long time. I think I tried one day to listen to things, and I just found that I was tuning it out a lot because I kept trying to think through other stuff while it was going on, and then I'd have to go back it up and listen to it again because I wasn't focused on it. That's just not worth it. So I just leave things off and sit in the silence both ways. Serves as a nice reflecting point. So it's kind of the time alone. But in the book, he talks about a number of ways to do this.
Yep.
He talks about exercising with nothing in your ears. He talks about going for long walks, just sitting and staring at things. Your classic, how do you spend time alone scenarios. He does spell out kind of why it's helpful, some of the science behind it to some degree. I thought it was interesting, but that part didn't trip my trigger of any kind. But he's ultimately making the point of get off on your own for a while. Don't fill all the gaps with all the technology. Like, get away from your screen. If you're doing your declutter, you're going to have this time and you're going to be trying to figure out what to do with it. Go for a walk. Like, that's the point that he's trying to make.
Yep. No, I totally get it. And he mentioned in Deep Work, I think, the productive meditation where you go for a walk and you don't bring a podcast or anything.
Right.
And you just think about the problem that you're trying to solve. And I've used that, and it definitely works. So I understand what he's getting at. One of the practices that he mentions in this section, which, by the way, that's one thing I like about each of these chapters, is he ends it with these different practices or things that you can do. So essentially action items. One of the practices is to write letters to yourself. And he talks about how there's benefit from thinking by writing, kind of along the lines of the morning pages. He didn't say that specifically, but that's where my brain went. And that really was the point where I reconciled in my own head, whether it's justification or not, that the digital declutter was not completely necessary for me, because you can totally do this using a digital device. You can get all of the benefit, I believe, from writing out your thoughts on a keyboard as opposed to analog. And I know that you would probably find something in there to say like, oh, analog is better. And maybe you're right to a certain degree, but I think
I am right.
The 80-20 here, though, is in how you use the device. So if you eliminate all notifications from your smartphone and you only use it to process and think by writing, I think that that's kind of what he's talking about here. Now, the problem is that almost nobody is going to be able to do that. And maybe actually there is nobody that's able to do that completely. And that's the problem, is that when you use your technology, you open the door to all the other things. And one of the things that, a couple things actually I wanted to call out from this section, which really just kind of shocked me. And I totally agree with this part. He says there's two pivotal points in the loss of solitude. One is the iPod and the other is the smartphone. Because the iPod allowed you to be distracted for long periods of time instead of only temporary interruptions. But there were still some barriers to using it in specific situations. You had the earbuds in your earpods in your ears, and sometimes you couldn't do that. You were in a situation, you were at work, whatever, that was going to be rude. And so you would have to take them out. But the smartphone took that barrier away, because now to be interrupted, you just need a glance. You don't need to put in your earbuds. And I think that's an important distinction. Now, if you can eliminate all the things that are going to cause you to glance at your phone, though, that kind of changes the narrative around that device. Problem is, like I said, no one does this. He shares a statistic from the 2015 Common Sense Media Study, which showed that teenagers, which he called the iGen, that's the generation after the millennials, they spend 9 hours per day on their phone. And he also mentions that you can basically track the spike in anxiety, depression, and suicide rates to the release of the smartphone. And I totally agree with that. Like, if you're that connected to your device, there's obviously something wrong there. And I know at this point I probably sound like the old man because I'm not part of that generation. I fall into the
old Mike.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like I have to recognize that bias as I come to this, and I say I'm not that bad. Everybody needs to recognize that, because the technology that is around when you are growing up, that's kind of normalized. And everything else that comes after that, you do have that negative, somewhat negative view towards. I think that's just natural. And so I do recognize that there's a little bit of a conflict of interest, I guess, maybe, because I'm part of this generation that views like 9 hours, regardless of the benefit from the 9 hours, as a weird thing. But Cal Newport is basically saying that there is a negative outcome associated with those 9 hours, and the fact that it is negative, plus they're spending 9 hours on this, like this is the thing that's leading to these skyrocketing anxiety, depression, and suicide rates. And I think there is some truth to that. But I do have to call that out as a disclaimer that, consider the source. I'm the millennial. I'm not the person who's part of this, who's saying, I'm going to rebel against this because this is not who I am. That's not who I am anyways. Does that make sense?
Yes. Two things here. One, I would challenge you to do a digital declutter and do all of your writing on paper during that time. I'd say that because my job is to type things on a keyboard, and I type on that keyboard all day long, and it's what I do. And if I spell out ideas via keyboard, they are not as good as the ideas I get on paper. I know that from doing like my idea generation on paper for probably the last 2 years. I know that if I try to do some form of writing on the keyboard where I'm generating something new or trying to help myself understand something, it's better off on paper. Just personal experience here. That's one. Two, he does talk a lot about this iGen with how they don't have any absence at all. Like there are no buffers at all because every time is filled with your phone. That's the point that I think he attributes to the anxiety levels and the increase in all of the disorders and such. So I think what ultimately he's getting at in this section is spend time alone, be okay with nothing going on, like not having the consumption of something going on at all times. Like get away from it. Like it's okay. It'll be scary at first. Trust me, it will be, but it'll be all right.
Yeah. So responding to the digital declutter thing, I think you're probably right in terms of idea generation. The thing that is holding me back is that I can't understand in my own head anyways, an easy bridge between the things that I would write analog and how do I publish that to the web in some way, shape, or form, because that's where most of my writing ends up. And if I could figure that out, I would be much more apt. I'm not going to commit verbally to doing the digital declutter. That is the big roadblock that I don't see a way around.
I used to do that. I used to write all my articles on paper. I don't write articles much anymore. I say much. I haven't written an article in a long time. I used to do that, and I would just dictate it into my computer. So I would just read it.
I may have to give that a shot, but I still don't think that that's going to get me where I would need to be.
It takes longer.
Yeah, it's going to take longer. And literally everything that I write is going to end up in some digital place eventually, like the show notes for today's episode.
Right.
I did that on my phone while I was at the bike or on the bike at the gym the other day. And so again, I've reconsidered how I'm using that device. I'm not just consuming stuff. I'm creating at that point. I'm looking at my mind node and I'm bringing in things that I want to talk about.
Right.
But if I were to do that by hand, number one, I can't do it there. And then number two, I have to recreate it all.
Right.
And that just seems like way more work than it's worth to me at the moment anyways.
Yeah, I think things like that, I would probably still type them in digitally. I think when I am talking about doing things via paper or a whiteboard, it's when it's only for your own use. Like I've started keeping my book notes in my notebook, and then when I'm done with them, I'm transcribing them. But that's the only thing I'm transcribing is my book notes. Because as far as I can tell, that's the only thing I actually want in digital format. Everything else, I'm totally cool with it just being gone. Like that's fine. You know, things like my journal entries and such, it's not digital. It's all on paper. I just throw the notebook on the shelf when I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Like that's what I do. I don't need to be able to search that. Like that's my view. So when you hear me tout using analog tools for things, it's typically whenever you're trying to do things for yourself, not when you're trying to create things for the broader world.
Sure. Yeah, and I do that occasionally. Like before we left for our family vacation, I mentioned I was working a lot of hours and I was completely overwhelmed at one point. I'm like, okay, I just need to make a list of everything that I need to do. So I covered my entire whiteboard with tasks that I had to do in the next week. And I at the top I put a title, before Florida, and I just checked things off one by one. And every day I could see my progress on the whiteboard. Like, that felt really good. And I was able to get everything done that I needed to get done. But it's not the way I'm going to manage my tasks by default.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I deploy it tactically.
No, I get it.
Anyways, we better move on if we want to keep this under 3 hours.
The next section here is don't click the like button.
Yep.
Don't click like.
This is one of my action items. Never click like again. This section really impacted me because when you think about what a like is, it really isn't anything. It fuels this dopamine rush for the person who gets the notification when you click it, but it's almost like taking the easy way out in terms of responding to something that somebody does. It's like if my kids were to come and say, hey, check out this thing that I made, and oh yeah, that's cool, and I totally brush them off, as opposed to, oh wow, I really like what you did with this specific thing. Like that's the difference in the quality of the interaction between talking to somebody about something and responding to something that they posted with a like, in my opinion. And so once I had that revelation, I was like, I never want to interact with anybody on that superficial level ever again. I would rather them not see my name on their Instagram post, and so it says like 47 other people like this post or whatever, and my name is missing. And whenever I do interact with that person, go deeper and have it be more impactful. That's kind of the thing I want to strive for, is every interaction that I have with someone, how do I make it meaningful? How do I not just go through the motions and do the bare minimum, but how do I make people feel good when they are done talking to me, And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I just know what it doesn't look like. And that's clicking the like button.
Yeah. I I totally understand this section, like, because what he's getting at is how if I click the like button, it boosts maybe the ego, maybe potentially of the other person who's getting it because they got something with likes on it. But it doesn't actually convey any true meaning. Like, you're eliminating a lot of the difficult conversations that can go with things, or the beneficial side of praise in some way. I'm hesitant to say I would never click like again to go as far as you are, Mike, because here's why. There are a lot of areas, especially in discourse forums, where clicking the like button is a nod to say, got it. Like, I'm not saying...
Okay, so yeah, I'm glad you called that out because I think you're right. I maybe shouldn't have phrased it that way. Never click like on social media platforms. So specifically, I'm talking about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't even know what else might appear.
Public stuff.
Yeah. So discourse, for example, I'll go through and I'll like comments, and usually it's a way just to say, like you said, I recognize this. Like in the focused forum, for example, I mentioned that I want to help some of our listeners get connected and start their own mastermind groups. So I'm going to host a Zoom meeting for people and just introduce them and walk them through the process. Okay. There's a whole bunch of people in there that are saying, hey, I'm interested. I don't need to reply to every single one of those people who's saying I'm interested.
Right.
But I click the little heart icon to show that I saw it. You know? And on Twitter, for example, I have it set up so that my likes actually get pulled into my Instapaper feed. So that's one of the ways that I collect links for the newsletter and things like that. But not with the intention of, I see you and here's my response, and have it be totally superficial and fake and shallow.
No, I went as far on discourse forums. There's a way you can turn off the notifications if you get a like, and I did do that because then like it doesn't become the two-way street. It's just a one-way street for me. So, you know, the big ones are the discourse meta forums. No need to explain what those are, but it's where a lot of my business comes from. With that, I disabled likes for the notifications that come to me on there. I still like other people's things because, again, it's a way to say, hey, I saw this, got it, I'm good to go. But I will say that reading this section made me contemplate, and I put it as an action item with a question mark because I'm not sure I want to do this. But it made me think about the process of building a plugin for discourse that removes likes altogether. Like, okay, could you build a plugin that you bolt on top of a forum and it removes the like function all in its entirety? Like, So it's a thing I'm thinking about. I don't know that that's actually worthwhile, but it's of interest to me.
Yeah. Well, the thing for me, and I think the larger principle here is not to settle for a connection and to look to replace those with conversation, because he makes the point in this section that conversation is better than connection. And that's really what I want to strive for, is the conversation, the dialogue.
Yep. And I think that was the main point he was trying to make in this section. It's fascinating. He gives you the history of the like button, where it came from Facebook and such.
That's pretty crazy.
The impact it's had, how they have used that as a way to try to get you to come back more often. Like that's his reasoning for why you shouldn't be clicking the like button. But I thought that part was interesting, but yeah.
All right, we better move on. Next section is to reclaim leisure. And this is an interesting section. He starts this chapter out by talking about financial independence. Because when you are financially independent, you naturally have more leisure time. And he talks about how there are a bunch of people kind of inspired by his buddy, Mr. Money Mustache, who are completely minimizing their cost of living so that they can become financially independent as soon as possible. And then they've got more options. And the goal here being that large amounts of leisure time are often filled with more strenuous activity. And that's the stuff that's really good for you, is this active leisure.
This section prompted me to start a list. Like, he talks about like knowing what your types of leisure are. like the ones that you enjoy doing. And I realized that I have a lot of like hobbies and things I like to do, but I've never like nailed down which ones I like the most and tried to figure out which ones work in different seasons, which ones provide a form of exercise. Like, can I plan this out in some way to where I can incorporate more leisure into life? So I've been starting that list. That's one of my actions, is to continue building that. I suppose I'll put it on the club. Like, I don't need to go through it here, but I can put that list up there on the club for the action item for it. But it's an interesting process to go through and nail down what forms of leisure do you like doing, because then you have a base to pull from when you do your digital declutter, Mike, because I know you're going to do one. Once you do this and you figure out that you've got free time, what are you going to do with it? Yes, spend time alone, but you can only, like, you don't want to spend 4 hours alone every day, especially when you have kids. So that would lead me
That's
to...
not even possible if you've got young kids.
Yeah, there's that too. Like, what types
That sounds wonderful.
A couple days a week, I'd be all right with that. What are the things I like to do, you know? And can I plan those into my week and take advantage of them?
Yeah.
That's my main goal there.
One of the things he talks about in this section, which makes me wish that you lived closer, is this whole idea of group socializing and board games. He mentions that board games specifically are a great leisure activity because they promote social interaction. And he actually calls it supercharged socializing, because the interactions that happen when you play a board game are of a higher intensity than those that are typically in polite society. And you can see this other places as well, like exercise groups, like CrossFit, for example. And really the thing that makes this work is that it requires you to spend time with the other people in person, and the activities provide some sort of structure for the interaction. And I think this is a really cool idea. I don't know a whole lot of people near me who I would want to sit down and play board games with, but I do love board games. We've got a whole closet full of them. I don't have as many as some people. I think Josh has probably got hundreds, but I'm not at that level. But I think this is a really cool idea, like to sit down with somebody and say, okay, we're gonna play this game, and the fact that you're playing the game, that providing the structure for all of the beneficial social stuff to happen, like that's pretty amazing to me as I read this chapter, that something as simple as a board game could do all that, you know?
Yeah, it's a fascinating section. And one of the pieces of that whole area that stood out to me was like building in structured social instances. Sometimes we think about social scenarios where you don't really want structure on them because you want to be able to let it be fluid, but that's actually the opposite. Like, it tends to hamper that. Whereas if you have a structured scenario, it tends to increase your connection points to other people. And one of the areas that he points this out is with Ben Franklin, who had a club that he put together, and they were like required to write essays and like all these different things. Like, they were supposed to come with points to debate. It sounded like a really cool group, but it had a very tight structure to it, and it thrived and it took off.
When I read that, I was like, this sounds a lot like Toastmasters.
Nice.
Without some of the political agenda, that some groups have now.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. And I thought that process of building in a formal way of socializing could have a pretty big impact. So I don't know. I could see how building those in to regular schedules would be beneficial, but it was an interesting point.
Well, we should definitely play board games when we are at Max Talk this summer.
Woohoo! Board game time.
All right, should we move on to the last chapter? Join the attention resistance.
Yeah, this is like the motivating thing.
Yeah, exactly. So this one is interesting. This is I've said that about every chapter, I think, but this is an interesting way to end the book, I would say. So he's basically putting out the call to embrace his ideas of the digital declutter and digital minimalism more so specifically. And he shares a couple of ideas here, which I want to call out. First is this New York Sun story, which was the first penny press. The idea being here that they were going to make it cheap, so everybody would read it. And it was launched by Benjamin Day in the 1830s. They wanted to gather a huge crowd and then sell their attention to advertisers. So nothing is new. This has been going on for hundreds of years. But it was interesting to see that this is the strategy that is being used online right now. I mean, my brother he works for a startup in San Francisco, and almost all startups have the goal of attracting as much attention as they can so that they can raise more funding before they run out of money. And it's just interesting to see, like, there's an entire sector of the economy that, like, they're all operating this way.
Right.
Like, that just shows you how much more valuable this stuff is than you realize.
Yeah, there's billions and billions of dollars poured into it.
Yep, exactly. He also talks about Facebook's folly, which is really interesting. I think this is a really good argument too, by the way. Do you remember this part?
Yes, but I'll let you explain it.
Okay, I was going to shut up because I've been talking a lot, but all right. So Facebook's folly, there was a paper put out by a couple of people, and this is part of like a social good thing for Facebook to discuss difficult issues. And one of the things that they talked about was basically to answer the question, is social media bad for us? And it was an article written by David Ginsburg and Moira Burke. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. And basically what they were saying is that the technology, whether it's good or bad, depends on how you use it, which contradicts Facebook's positioning as a foundational technology. So prior to this paper, Cal Newport is arguing, Facebook was saying, we are great and we're going to allow you to connect with all these other people in your life that you wouldn't have been able to connect with otherwise. So there's a huge benefit to using Facebook. And David Ginsburg and Moira Burke were basically saying that, well, there may be a benefit, there may not be a benefit. It really depends on how you use it. So that kind of presents the idea that you shouldn't just use Facebook because it'd be weird if you didn't. That's kind of the idea behind the foundational technology, is that everybody uses this, and the article encourages people to think about how they are using the service, which again is kind of contradictory to everything that Facebook was based off of, where it's just use the service because it's good. In fact, back at the beginning, I'm not sure if we mentioned this, but there was a quote by one of the people who started Facebook. I'm trying to find it in my note. Oh, Sean Parker. The thought process is, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? So if you are now embracing the idea that every moment that you spend with the service is not intrinsically good, then you've kind of introduced a new thought paradigm. Like these ideas are conflicting with each other. And I can see where that might be a dangerous idea to present, especially as an official Facebook view, as you really should be considering how you use this service, when everything that they're engineering behind the service is to get you use it as much as you can.
Right.
Like at some point you have to say, this is where the line is, and it's probably a lot sooner than a lot of people realize.
Correct. Yeah. It's I think this whole section, one of the pieces of that I found it very interesting was that they made the point that the people who build Facebook would not be able to build Facebook if they were using Facebook the way that they want people to use Facebook.
Exactly. You just described it way better than I did. You should have introduced this.
Like that's the whole point here.
Yep.
If you were using this the way that they want you to use it, you wouldn't be able to build the tool that they built.
Yep.
Because you wouldn't have the time or the headspace to pull it off. To me, that's alarming. Is that if that's what they're after, they're basically trying to squash competition. I don't think that's their intent, but it ends up happening.
Yep.
That's what they're after. So I join the attention resistance. That whole chapter, it's about explaining how we need to reclaim our intent with technology and limit the amount of attention we give to these devices. Not to say you can't use them at all. Cal Newport is a computer scientist, after all.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. And I'll also say, like, the people who work with the stuff, like, pay attention to how they use it, because it's very little. Like, that's the people who work with it and build it, like, they're the ones who are going to use it the least and have the most intention with it. So pay attention to what they do, follow suit. Like, that's a lot of what I took from this book.
Yeah, and this is, again, like, this section enabled me, I feel like, with my idea to not embrace the complete digital declutter.
Cheater.
Because he talks about, in the practices here, using social media like a professional. And he shares a lot of experiences with this lady who had reached out to him after deep work. And so it was basically a reader that he got connected with. And I thought it was cool that he included a whole bunch of her stuff in this book. But he calls it thresholding. And this, I think, is this spoke to me specifically, because this is what I want to do with my social media. I don't just want to consume stuff. I want to use it like a professional. I want to use it to gather news and things that I need for what I'm going to create. And I want to use it to get my message out there. But I don't want to get sucked into the rabbit hole of the endless feeds. And I think that, like, if that's the only thing that you got from this book, it's still really, really valuable. I did have another thing from this section, though, which is part of my action items, and that is to figure out my own low information diet. So don't just assume that I need to subscribe to all these different things, but kind of curate them more aggressively and say, for my tech news, I'm going to look at these sites rather than, like right now, I've got a whole bunch of them that are plugged into my RSS feed, and I probably don't need to be subscribed to all of those, because when something happens, they basically all say the same thing, so pick my favorite one, for example. But I want to really think about this and think about, how am I going to get the information that I want, that the news that I want to read, and then cut out everything else that is just going to be contributing to the noise. I feel like that's going to alleviate a lot of the mental burden of trying to keep up with things. I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but kind of in the back of my head right now, I kind of feel like the amount of things that I'm going to have to check is going to be like reduced by 200%. It's going to be like a third of what I'm going through now is kind of my initial thoughts on this.
There's a lot in this book that you could talk about for a long time. We could all talk about for a long time, but
we've been talking about it for a long time.
We have. So what do you say we go to action items here?
Let's do it. All right. So I've got 4. Number 1, to list the benefits that I get from the platforms that I am going to use. Number 2, to delete all social media from my phone. So it doesn't mean that I am not going to be on Twitter. That's kind of the one social media network that I've decided I'm going to still hang out on, but I'm not going to check it from my phone. I'm going to be doing it from my iPad and from my Mac specifically. I've also got never click like again, which you convinced me I maybe need to rephrase that a little bit. But for social media, in terms of the interacting with somebody else, that is not going to be a mechanism that I use anymore. I'm going to try to replace that with conversation. So if I like something somebody posts, I'm going to send them a text message, say, hey, I really like this. By the way, I did that the other day. I was listening to Sean West's podcast, and they were talking about hustle, and I texted Sean and I said, hey, I really love your recent podcast episode. He gets that message, and that means a lot more than, oh, Mike Schmitz hearted my tweet or whatever.
Right.
So just as an example. And then the last one, I just mentioned, figure out my own low information diet, just curate the number of places that I'm looking for things and reduce that number.
It's a lot there. I've got 2.5.
You have one that's half done.
Yeah. First one, I am doing a digital declutter. I'm down that path. I'll make the action item for that the day this releases, and we'll talk more about it on the Bookworm Club. Some of the details I'm doing there, because there's some things like I removed notifications on messages on my phone, like just a bunch of little details that I've come up with, like not even having a task list on my phone anymore. Yes, there's lots of little details. So I'll spell that out and try to keep people updated about it as the month goes on, because it's, interesting. And then I've also got a list of leisure activities that I've been slowly building. I'll put that on the club as well as to what those are. Just kind of a fun list that I can pull from, whenever I'm setting up my week, what days am I going to do what? Because I have to plan out what I'm going to do for leisure time, because it does exist whether I realize it or not. But I haven't been intentional with it. So I would like to be intentional with it. And then the half is I need to figure out if it's worth building a plugin for Discourse to remove likes. I don't know what that would look like. I have a feeling it's more complicated than I think, but here we are.
Here we are. All right. So style and rating. Should I go first?
It's your book.
All right. I really am struggling with what exactly I want to rate this. I've gone back and forth quite a bit in my head, even while we've recorded this. I think I'm going to land on 4.0. And that is because I really like Cal Newport's style. I could read his books all day, every day. This one, though, I didn't enjoy as much as the other Cal Newport books that I've read. And I know that's kind of a lofty standard to live up to. I mentioned So Good They Can't Ignore You has ended up being one of the most impactful books that I've ever read. I absolutely loved Deep Work. This one does kind of feel like Old Man Yells at Cloud. But I think that there's a lot of truth to everything that he says. But I just could not completely disconnect from that idea as I read it. Maybe you're able to, maybe you're not. I think that this book is going to draw some very strong reactions from people who are both for and against it, which doesn't really say anything positively or negatively about the book. I would argue. I do think that there's a lot of value in reading this. I think that everybody should read it. I think you will walk away with a better understanding of what is happening to you as you use your digital devices. And then you will be more informed so you can decide whether you are okay with that or you're not okay with that and make the proper adjustments. I get why he did it, but I wasn't a huge fan of the digital declutter coming in the first section. It felt kind of weird and anticlimactic to me at that point. And maybe that's because I had the reaction that I did where it's like, oh, I don't think I'm ready to do that quite yet. But I kind of feel like if he had waited until the end and then said, you really should do a digital declutter, maybe he would have got me on board. I think the positioning of it just felt kind of weird. But overall, it's a great typical Cal Newport book, and I would recommend it to everyone.
So I came into this book very skeptical. I just want to point that out, that I intended... I rated this before I started. I even have it in my notes. I rated this a 2.5 before I started. And as I read it, I think I would disagree with you on the layout. Like, I liked that he started with the digital declutter up front, because it really sets things up for the rest of the book, as far as like, you're going to create a lot of empty space, and what do you do with it?
Sure.
Like, to me, it felt like that made a lot of sense. So I understand why he did that, but I also get your point. Like, it seems anticlimactic. I get your point. I just didn't feel that way. Cal has a very easy reading. Like, he's easy to read. He has a great writing style, I think. Comparing this to the only other book I've read from him is Deep Work, and I vastly prefer this one to Deep Work. As somebody who works in the tech industry and has been around it for a while and goes pretty deep with some of those things, I feel like he nailed it on the head. Like, he really did well with this. Again, I was not expecting what I got out of this. I was expecting to come out of this with no action items, was expecting to rate it pretty low, just because we've heard this, it's cranky old man thing going on. Like, that's what I expected. Was not that at all. I was completely shocked and excited about the fact that he gave me basically a lifestyle process to build off of. I think if you work in the tech industry, or you are anywhere near tangentially related to that sector, this is a must read. I think if you have a smartphone, it's probably a must read because I feel like it gives you a base to work with. I am going to put this at a 5.0, Mike. Like I feel like this is one that I really, really suggest for most people. Like if you're someone who uses a basic phone and have forever, this is probably not going to be for you. But the bulk of people, this is something you need to read. Like I do think this is something people need to jump into.
Sure.
As somebody who works in that industry and have read a lot of books around this, to me, this is by far the best one that I've run across. So kudos to Cal Newport for covering a hard topic.
Fair enough. Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't mention what I was going back and forth with. I was erring on the low side. I'm trying to decide whether I want to rate this a 4.0 or a 4.5.
You already did this. Come on.
I know, but I just want to say, like, I'm not that far away from you, even though we're a whole point away. Like, I totally agree with everything that you said. And
Sure.
I understand where you're coming from. I just think that this isn't Cal Newport's best book either. That is the other influencing factor with my score. But
Sure.
yeah, great book. Definitely recommend that people read it. We've got a couple other books that are going to be coming up. The next one is your pick.
Yeah, so this one's mentioned in some of the early chapters of Digital Minimalism, Drunk Tank Pink by Adam Alter, something like that. Drunk Tank Pink. One, I really like the title of this book. And I will say I'm probably half to 2/3 of the way through it. This thing's messing with my head. Like,
yeah?
It's messing with me. It'll be a fun episode next time.
All right. And the one after that is inspired by the Bookworm Club, and that is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, who is a former U.S. Navy SEAL. I don't know much about this book, but I've seen it come up several places and been recommended several times. And then when I saw that there were a bunch of votes for it in the Bookworm Club, I'm like, that's the one.
Sure. I did have a Gap book this time, Mike.
Nice.
Ben Carson's One Nation. And so Ben Carson, if you don't know him, was one of the potential presidential candidates running against Donald Trump on the Republican side of the fence. So he wrote a book called One Nation based on a sermon he gave at, I'm drawing a blank on where it was. But anyway, he gave a sermon and it struck a lot of people and he wrote a whole book around the topic. So
nice.
Interesting book.
I also am reading a Gap book, which is pretty long, but so far it's pretty good. And that is The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. And I'm about a third of the way through it. If I were to condense it down right now, it would basically be tell everybody everything, over communicate. But they basically have like a lot of examples of how they used it in their businesses and how it completely turned things around. And for anybody who is in business, I think this is a good read.
Interesting.
Maybe we'll talk about these more on our super secret members only podcast feed at some point.
That doesn't exist yet. Sure.
Right.
Fun times. Well, if you have a book you would like to hear us go through on Bookworm, club.bookworm.fm, click the recommend button and it adds it to the list. People keep forgetting, make sure you vote for it.
Yes.
Once you create it, click the vote button. Like I've seen quite a few here and there of recommendations that have 0 votes. That should never happen. If you're going to recommend it, vote for it. Just going to say that. You can also see the full list of recommendations out there. You can see the full list of the books that we've covered. So go check out the club. You know, that's where all of those are showing up.
And if you want to support the show, there's a couple ways that you can do that now. First way, you can join the revolution and take down KCRW by leaving us an iTunes rating and review. Like Bennett0415, who says, best podcast, hands down. I love what you guys are doing. I value your expertise so much. I wish I was a better reader. My comprehension is terrible. It's always been a struggle, but you inspire me to never give up, even when I'm going on 60. Thanks, guys. And I would say that maybe giving us expertise is a little bit of lofty praise, but thanks for the 5-star review. We really appreciate it. I also want to point out, I forgot to put this in the notes, but I shared with you, Joe, that if you search for Bookworm in Overcast, at least for me, it is the first return. So I don't know if just iTunes isn't updating. Maybe the battle's already been won. But please give us a review. Tell us what you like, don't like, what we can do better. And then also you can join the Bookworm Club and you can share your action items there as well. I mentioned at the beginning, really encouraged by the conversation that's happening around those, and hopefully it encourages other people to take action on the stuff that they're hearing. And this isn't just information, but it actually produces some action for you. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be creating a way for people to support the show financially. If you want to do that, you can become a member. You can click the button in Overcast and it'll take you to the sign up page. Otherwise, it is bookworm.fm/membership. And then the links on the bookworm.fm page, those are Amazon affiliate links. So if you decide that you're going to read along and you want to purchase a book, if you use one of those links, that helps us out as well.
Woot woot. Fun times. Excited about all this. For next time, Drunk Tank Pink by Adam Alter. Pick that up and we'll go through it next time.